Get the cash flow you need with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Pay expenses, make upgrades, perform maintenance, and more with interest-free and low-interest financing. Visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun, Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, of course, as always, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Please tell your friends, your neighbors, anybody that you know is involved in agriculture about RealAg Radio. The more, the merrier, so to speak. Well, it's Friday today, like I mentioned, of course, and we're going to have a beef market update today with Anne Wasko. What's happening with the cash price numbers? We've seen a lot of volatility in the futures lately on feeder cattle and on live cattle. Friday was no different in that space for sure. We're also going to get an idea on how those June export numbers were for Canada as well. Need to keep up the demand, not only domestically, but internationally as well. We're also going to have a RealAg issues panel here today. We're definitely talking about this rail strike that is going to happen potentially next week already, where the National Post had a story out today talking about how even more products are being taken off the rail. We heard from Karen Proud of Fertilizer Canada earlier this week about how anhydrous ammonia is one of those products, but more being added to the list. Is, everything just doesn't grind to a halt August 22nd. It's already grinding to a halt. This is of grave concern to farmers and ranchers, and of course, most industries in Canada, whether you're importing or exporting. We know that based on the recent Real Agri Studies data that 80% of Western Canadian farmers are concerned about the impact of this rail strike. We did see Labour Minister McKinnon come out and say he will not push for binding arbitration. Let's hope that his mind changes on that here in the coming days as we get a little bit closer. We can't afford for this thing. This is my opinion. We can't afford for this thing to be a 3-day thing. And then, now we're going to get back to work. Why? There's a huge cost to that. $1 billion worth of product is shipped every single day by rail in Canada. So that's one of the topics we're going to get into for sure. We're also going to talk about the passing of Chuck Strahl, former ag minister, and a whole lot more. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Also want to mention that Monday night, I know many of you are huge fans, loyal viewers of The Agronomist. There is no show on Monday night, okay? So keep that in mind. So you got a free Monday this Monday. No Agronomist show this Monday night. I want to give you a bit of an update. Speaking of the strike, I want to give you a bit of an update on our poll. And many of you have voted. You can go to realagriculture.com and vote. What should the government do about a rail strike? Lots of options there. Go there, vote, and we'll continue to see what people think should happen. The leading answer right now is designate grain movement as essential so it's less affected by strikes. That's a long-term solution. Not sure it solves the short-term one. Binding arbitration continues to be the fan favorite from many advocacy groups. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into the beef markets with Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange, right after this.
Join us for the Canadian Beef Industry Conference, August 19th to 22nd in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Spend time networking on the trade show floor, hear from keynote speakers, and take in breakout sessions designed to increase profit, manage your rangeland, and navigate trends. Get up close to advanced techniques and hands-on demos, and kicking it all off is Lamley's Bull event. Proud, sustainable, and innovative, we are beef. Registration is now open. Visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
If you have a growing list of questions about getting more from your fields, know that Koch Agronomic Services has an answer for every acre. With a full spectrum of nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement options, Koch Agronomic Services offers a deep portfolio of agronomically effective products, each designed to enhance yield potential, all available to help solve your problems. Find the answer that's right for your acres. Start by visiting kochag.ca. That's Koch ag.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time to talk about what's going on in the cattle markets. Sponsored by Maizex Seeds. Field by Field, Maizex is bringing Canadian seed to farmers across Canada. Maizex is your source for high-performing soybeans and grain silage and grazing corn hybrids. Visit Maizex.com to find out more and talk to your local Maizex representative. Let's get into the beef market update with Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne, how are we doing?
I'm good, Shaun. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing good. Can you believe that we are already into the back end of August?
No, I cannot. What a summer. It's just been flying.
It very, very much has been. Okay, let's get into what's going on in the cash markets south of the border as well as up here.
Well, in both cases, lower, I guess, in a nutshell. It looks like we haven't seen much south trade, but in the north, 190 live caught most of the cattle so far this week. That's 3 lower than last week. Dressed sales in the north, 298. That's 7 lower than last week. And so with that, remembering that we saw Texas and Kansas last week at 186, I would expect we're going to see a bit lower than that this week. But also remember, we've been narrowing that north-south gap up. More cattle coming on in the north versus the south. And so it might not lose as much money as what we've seen in the north. So we'll keep an eye on that. The cutout last night, the choice cutout, closed just under 317. So looking back versus last week, that means it is up $4.50 from last week. And again, getting supported from the smaller kills we've seen of late. So that's the reason why the cutout's up a wee bit. The spread between choice and select is about $15 back. Again, pretty typical for this point in August. Locally, just bringing it back to the Alberta market, Shaun, we saw fat cattle. It looks like when all the dust settles, we're going to be off probably $7 to $8 dressed. $4.18 to $4.20 delivered is what I've been hearing so far. So again, when Canfax reports their weekly average, it's probably going to be down into that low 250s this week. And if you're keeping track, wondering where does that mean from a P&L perspective? If you're on the spot market, and again, yes, there's not a pile of cattle on the spot market anymore, but probably into the red for sure. Averaging break-evens probably around 260. So if we're getting cash cattle in the low 250s, you can do the math from there.
So this is where we got to be careful, right? We see higher prices or high prices relative to, say, the 5-year or 10-year average for sure. It doesn't mean necessarily more profit because the cost complexes increase so much as well.
Exactly. So even though we've talked about feed grain prices coming down and that cost of gain to put the pounds on is certainly lower than what it was last year, you and I both know, and the listeners know, what feeder cattle prices have done versus last year. So that's why that break-even is staying pretty elevated.
Yeah. A bit of a separation here between what's going on in the futures market and what's happening in the cash market.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And again, the economic news that we've had out over the last week to 10 days in terms especially of the U.S. economic news and concerns of where we are in terms of possible recession, unemployment, all those things, putting lots of weight on all markets, including cattle markets and commodity markets. Certainly that pressured the 2025 contracts. People are kind of a, I'll believe it when I see it kind of, mentality, whereas today cash is cash. And certainly cash is stronger than what we're seeing in those deferred contracts.
Well, there's some, I don't know if it's irony, but what comes to mind is, this week we heard President Biden and presidential candidate Harris, Vice President Harris, talking about, mentioning beef as an example of inflation at the grocery store and food costs being high and gouging of the consumer. Here's the reality. The economics is that as producers, we need the prices to be at what they are today, whether the consumer likes it or not, if we have a chance to scrape out a profit. That's the realities of the market right now.
It is. And of course, at all times over history, somebody's going to be making some money and somebody's going to be losing some money within our complex, right? And so today, for sure, looking at retail prices, they've been pushed higher. I think we talked about that 2 weeks ago. And whereas the cutout value, that wholesale price, is actually lower than where it's been. So everybody's getting a different piece. The argument today is the retailer's getting too much. So, but everybody takes their turn.
Next week I'm going to be at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference, and we're going to do a live recording of RealAg Radio. I'm looking forward to do it from the stage when we get an opportunity to do it, like we did last year at CBIC, and we'll do it again next week in Saskatoon. We're talking a lot about trade. Can you give us a bit of an update on beef exports?
Right. I suspect convention goers are going to hear quite a bit on trade. So we did just get the StatsCan numbers for June out this past week. And certainly, remembering back to June here in Canada, of course, we had that big strike at Guelph. So that impacted how much tonnage, how many cattle we killed, how much tonnage was being produced. And so it showed up in the data. It's funny how it all works out at the end of the day. And so we did see smaller exports in the month of June by 7% versus last year. Year to date, they're still up 4%. So Shaun, June was the first month this year that we saw year-over-year decline in exports. So up until now, they've been up, which has been a good supporting part to our demand story. But June was down 7, largely, again, due to that strike in Guelph. So year to date, we're up 4 in volume, up 3 in value. It's still a good story, going on in terms of that demand piece. Just breaking it down by country, our 3 main destinations for Canadian beef. To the U.S. in June, we were down 5%. Year to date, we're still up 7. To Japan, we were down 22. Year to date, we're still up 6, though. And to Mexico, we were down 37. I can see, looking at the U.S. data, Mexico has been a bigger piece of their destination market, and I suspect there's been some trade-offs in terms of Canadian versus U.S. beef there. And for the record, U.S. beef exports, we've just talked about Canadian. U.S. beef exports in June were down 2%. So kind of across the board, looking at a little less. But it'll be interesting to see what the experts on your panel and next week talk about in Saskatoon.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to keep in mind that's, for June, so we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that year to date over the last 12 months, a bit of a broader timeline to see kind of where that trend is headed. If we get to July, August, September, October, and we're still showing, down year over year results, then I think there's a little bit more cause for concern. But hopefully, though, that Canadian number being down 7 has a lot to do with that Guelph strike, as you indicated. We also have some updated numbers when it comes to feeder imports.
Yeah, I don't think we've talked about this for a bit, Shaun. So we just got the June feeder import data out, and we saw just over 22,000 head imported in the month of June. That's the same as June of 2023, again, keeping track. Year to date, our feeder imports, Shaun, are up 7%. We're sitting at about 143,000 head have moved north. So on a monthly average, because again, they move around, as you suggested, month over month, so far this year, our monthly average imports have been between 23 and 24,000 head. That's the same as last year. So it almost, to me, looks like, Shaun, we found a place where feeder imports have stabilized. This is where the numbers are for now. But we'll keep an eye. We also have to talk about exports, because it's only one piece to talk about the feeder cattle that are moving north. The feeder cattle moving south are certainly much smaller. This year, when you look at that net trade between feeder imports and exports, we're sitting up 11% net import. And so that number is 77,000 head. And why does that number matter? Canada used to be a net exporter of between 300,000 and 400,000. And so that's what's really changed. That's been, that was kind of, even looking at the period from 2005 to 2015, that we saw kind of that 300,000 to 400,000 net export. So that's really changed the Canadian feeder supply that we used to think about. Now we're a net importer. It looks like it's pretty steady, and that's a regular piece of our supply that we have to acknowledge and understand what's filling these feedlot pens.
Smaller herd factor, more cattle on, more feeding capacity.
More capacity, exactly. Especially as we head into the fall of 24.
Yeah. So it's that's quite the reversal. Like when you really think about it, like those aren't small numbers. Like we're going from 10 to 20. Like we're talking hundreds of thousands.
Exactly. And so again, as you wonder, how have we kept production at these levels here in Canada? That's the feeder supply story has simply changed.
And you mentioned the word, we found stability. Could it be we found a cap? Not?
I'm nervous to say cap simply because the Canadian cow herd has continued to get smaller. I wonder in the years as we go forward, do feeder supplies increase to make up for that smaller calf crop going forward? So I think it's stabilized for now. For a few years, it was just growing. Now in the last couple of years, it's stabilized. I'd be very cautious to suggest that that's a cap.
Okay, cool. And if you look at that December live cattle future, we're bumping around that 178 right now. If you look at the chart here in the past year, it looks like 190 is kind of a number that the market says, speaking about caps, it kind of looks like a bit of a top for us.
Yeah, so far for sure. Now I think the argument as we go forward into 25 and 26 is that supplies get smaller again, especially from a U.S. perspective. And that number, that cap that we've seen kind of stop the markets in 24, I think is going to get pushed for 25, to be honest with you.
The supply cycles here are so long, right? I was listening to Bloomberg Radio this morning, and they were talking about how, one of the reasons why beef is expensive in the store is a lack of supply and the numbers going down. And one of the analysts said, we need to have more. Let's just let's make more beef. It's just like, if only it was that simple. Like we're expanding a car plant or something.
Yeah,
so
okay. By 2030, we'll get at her.
Exactly. Hey, Anne, have yourself a great weekend.
Okay, you too. Thanks, Shaun.
That is Anne Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange, joining us every 2 weeks for great analysis of what's happening in the beef markets. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to dive into the biggest issues of the week, including this rail strike that is really going to impact agriculture in Canada and the U.S., as well as the panel's insights on the results of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index for July. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's hybrid fall rye varieties and their end uses, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy specific to your region.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Let's get rolling with the RealAg Issues panel here on RealAg Radio. Up first, it's Kelvin Heppner coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how are you doing?
Doing well here, Shaun. We've received our first major rain this week in, probably over a month. So the soybeans and later season crops are certainly going to benefit. The oats and other cereals that are in swath, not so much. But we'll take the moisture in the long term, I think.
Good for those soybeans, those August rains.
For sure. It definitely will, I think, have added a couple bushels at least yesterday.
Do you feel ready for harvest?
Do you ever? Well, we thought we would start this week, and we haven't yet. A lot of our neighbors around here have been going already, and so we're kind of in that limbo stage where we feel ready, itching to go, but there's still always another thing that could be fixed on a truck or on the combine or worked on, that kind of thing. So we're in that stage right now.
Yeah, for sure. Also joining us is Lyndsey Smith, coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. We are halfway through August.
Yeah, we are already. Can you believe that?
No. I would like to state for the record that August has disappeared and is disappearing quickly. So to Kelvin's point about not being ready, we are not ready. I am not ready.
This morning, my kids are older than both of yours. But I had said to Christy, we're at that point in the summer where, yep, time for the kids to go back to school.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I'm ready. I don't know that they are, but I would like them out of my house in the morning. Thanks.
Yeah.
Let's talk about FP Genetics Hybrid Fall Rye. Innovative seed genetics for Canadian farmers. Contact your local FP territory manager to discuss your fall seeding strategy and discover Hybrid Fall Rye's flexible end uses for marketing, milling, distilling, ethanol, and feed. Visit hybridfallrye.ca. Okay, gang, lots happened this week. Let's start with the railway strike and what's happening there. We asked farmers yesterday on the Farmer Rapid Fire, what kind of impact would a strike have? Published a story at RealAgriculture.com. 80% of Western Canadian farmers significantly concerned or somewhat concerned about this strike. There is going to, also farmers indicating there's going to be alterations to their or impact to their marketing activities of their crop for sure. Obviously, the West gets a lot of attention here, but it's also very much an Eastern story as well. Jay Lewis yesterday in the Farmer Rapid Fire had a great response. We talked about propane for grain drying. This ends up being a wet corn harvest in Ontario, and your grain dryer is powered by propane, which many are. You may have a problem. Lyndsey, or Kelvin, let's go to you first. What did the Labor Minister say? No binding arbitration, period?
Yeah, Labor Minister Stephen McKinnon yesterday published a letter to basically reject CN Rail's request for binding arbitration. So farm groups, we've heard from Greg Northey with Pulse Canada and the Ag Transport Coalition, also Kyle Larkin of Grain Growers, Karen Proud with Fertilizer Canada this week on the show. All of them mentioned binding arbitration as one of the possible, if not the leading solution to this at this moment with the tight timeline here. If the minister stepped in and said, for the good of Canada's economy, we need to have binding arbitration here between these parties and resolve this before it comes to a strike or lockout next week. And so binding arbitration has been a request of industry and of the railways. And yesterday, the Labor Minister rejected CN's request for that. And so he basically said he would like to clarify that it's the shared responsibility of the railways and the union to negotiate in good faith and work diligently towards a new collective agreement. That's where I think a lot of people would take issue whether there are good faith negotiations happening at this point, as the union feels it has quite a bit of leverage in forcing a work stoppage here, or at least the odds of one. And so that's where I think there's an argument to be made to the minister that these negotiations aren't happening in good faith, and that's why binding arbitration is needed. But obviously the minister, as of yesterday, didn't feel that was the case yet.
Well, the Labor Minister is thinking from a labor perspective here. What we need is revenue. The Minister in charge of Revenue, Marie-Claude Bebeau, former Ag Minister, Finance Minister,
Agriculture Minister.
Need the Ag Minister. We need the Energy Minister. They all need to walk down the hall and have a conversation with Minister McKinnon and say, "Listen here, Lyndsey, I think we need to change your opinion on this."
So, and, you mentioned the impact of this potentially on Ontario. And I think that, perhaps in the past, when it's just one railway, let's say, that has been threatening a strike or eventually goes to a strike, often we really do, as a country, really focus on the West, and we focus on, especially in the agriculture sector, on grain movement. What is in front of us right now is a very different beast. This is both railways at the same time being in a lockout or strike position. We know that the railways have said they are going to do a lockout on August 22nd. That's Thursday, everybody. And we are talking about both railways. Both. East, west, everywhere. We're talking about grain, we're talking about propane, like energy, we're talking about goods, we're talking everything here. And this is why exactly that. I understand from the labor minister's perspective, especially as precarious as the Liberals are as far as popularity right now and where they are in the polls, they likely don't want to be seen as being hard on unions right now. But realistically, this is a gigantic economic issue. This isn't just a labor issue or a union issue or a popularity issue for the Liberals. This is an incredible one. And, you know, as Kelvin outlined, the people that you've talked to this week, Shaun, about the potential catastrophic impact, we cannot overstate how serious this is for everyone across Canada, and especially in the agriculture industry, of course, and for Ontario, for our grain drying season. Just this week, being out on the landscape, had a couple meetings, met with the Ontario Soil Network, did a bit of the tour this week. We have the potential of very variable corn crops. What is that going to mean? That's going to mean you're going to have very wet corn mixed in with your very dry corn. What does that mean? You're going to need to dry it and probably over dry it. So one of the things I found really interesting this week that I think we also need to drive home, and yes, where is our ag minister on this? Would love to know where you are. Lawrence McCauley, give us a call. Karen Proud outlining that we learned that supply chains, if they do stop, which we already know certain products are embargoed, it's not like you just flip a switch and they magically move again, right? Every day that things are stopped, it takes more than that to get things moving. So even if we can avoid this strike, we are already going to have some impact. But the fact that if the strike happens, every single day that it carries on is going to have a larger impact longer term on the logistics of moving product in this country.
Well, because we think that all political parties should get fair and equal treatment here, Kelvin. The Conservatives haven't exactly been super loud about this either.
No, it's clear it's not on their top 5 lists. They're usually pretty specific with their messaging, and we haven't seen a lot of noise yet from the Conservatives on this. And I think there's strategic reasons behind that as well. As certainly just last week we saw Pierre Poilievre give a speech where he announced a bunch of plans for tariffs on EVs and steel coming into Canada from China. He had that speech at the Stelco plant in southern Ontario in front of a union crowd. And so certainly the Conservatives are courting the union blue-collar vote right now too, and having success at that. And so they're not at this moment going to stick their neck out, it seems. And that's one of the reasons why the Teamsters Union has so much leverage right now in the political realm. There's not an appetite to come across as anti-union.
Do you think that he is saying, for example, the tariffs on EVs coming out of China? Do you believe that he's doing that to speak to the union, or is he setting the seed to be in line with what the Americans are asking for if he does become prime minister?
No, I think it's completely about workers and jobs, not about the Americans. Pierre Poilievre is running to be prime minister. He doesn't care about Canada-U.S. relations at this point yet.
Okay,
that's way down the list of his priorities.
Lyndsey, you're going to speak on?
Well, I was like, hey, Kelvin coming out strong on his opinion there. You heard it here first, everybody. But I have to agree that realistically, we sort of have. I'm certain that there are those conversations happening, but at the same time, you've got to win being prime minister first before you really worry about those things. So I would agree. Perhaps not as strongly worded as Kelvin. Well done.
Something that was strongly worded is, I'm going to put Kelvin on the spot again, Lyndsey. Watch this.
I like it.
What did you make of what Pierre Poilievre tweeted this week about the temporary foreign worker program, basically siding with the UN report that talked about how the TFW program is a breeding ground for modern slavery?
Yeah, that quote came from the UN rapporteur who did this special report on the temporary foreign worker situation in Canada, and it's the second or third time that we've heard a UN. I might all be the same person, but it's coming from the UN again, that using that word slavery in connection with the temporary foreign worker program here in Canada, which I think is quite extreme. But again, in terms of Poilievre and the Conservatives' messaging, it's all about workers and jobs, and a lot of the messaging and backlash to this story this week comes from people being concerned about temporary foreign workers undercutting wages to people who are already in Canada and suppressing the wage side of things in the labor market. And so again, Poilievre is choosing to fight for jobs and workers the whole side of this argument that hasn't been discussed publicly is that the concern about wage inflation. You go back a year or two, there were concerns from major economists, central bank governors about wage inflation and a wage inflation spiral. And the influx of temporary foreign workers into Canada over the last couple of years has helped to address that concern. And so I know there's a lot of criticism of Tim Hortons and other fast food chains for all the temporary foreign workers that they are employing now, and how that has taken away jobs and potentially hurt wages to people already in Canada, and taken away jobs from 17-year-old Canadians who would in the past have had a job at Tim Hortons kind of thing. But at the same time, it would have also been reflected in probably in our food inflation if wages had jumped to employ more Canadians and not had this temporary foreign workers workforce come in. So that part of the conversation hasn't been had, and certainly Polyev and the Conservatives are taking the side of workers again on this.
Well, here's the reality. It's very clear for agriculture from an advocacy standpoint. No matter if we have a Liberal government or Conservative government, the work is not done. There's going to have to be just as much explaining of the benefits of the TFW program to agriculture with a Conservative labor ministers there has been, or immigration ministers there has been with immigration minister Mark Miller under this Liberal government. So the work does not stop. In fact, I might argue maybe not to be more. So, hey, we got to take a break. We've got more coming up here on RealAg Radio and the RealAg Issues panel right after this.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey, the answer to your above-ground nitrogen loss problem, right? You got that problem? A lot of you do. The answer is Anvil's nitrogen stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anvil's dual active ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. You can also go to kochagronomicservices.com. We got the RealAg Issues panel, Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner of Real Agriculture, myself, Shaun Haney. Okay, Lyndsey, we put out the results for the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. We had Justin Funk on the show earlier this week from Real Agri Studies. The one thing that stuck out to me is we have seen the commodity market really, erode in value since, for sure since spring. If you look at some of the charts since the middle of May, it's pretty apparent what's been going on. I personally was a little bit surprised that we did not see the current or future farm financial performance numbers correspondingly kind of in parallel sort of drop. I felt actually pretty good about how they held at that 84. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it is. I think I was somewhat surprised as well. Is that a hint of farmers being eternal optimists? Maybe that might play a role. Is it farmers, feeling like they've put in the work to try and hedge against, the full negative impact that this could have? Maybe there's some of that in there. Because, of course, these are some of the things that we would think through and go through to try and figure out, how we feel about maybe our current financial performance, but of course, looking forward, what we're going to do about it. At the same time, I am curious to know when we go back a few months from now to check in again. Again, this is, the longer low prices continue, perhaps the bleaker some things look. Also, as combines roll and farmers know exactly what they have in the bin, that can change our financial outlook as well, or how confident we're feeling on our future financial outlook. So I was surprised by it not being more negative, but I think there's probably several factors that have work their way into that potentially. Whether or not we see sort of who was right, I guess, is what plays out in the next few months as we go back and ask these questions.
Yeah, one of the positives, I think it's still in negative territory, but confidence in making farm investments, those capital purchases, 63 to 200, still way, quite well below the neutral line of 100, but it's the first time we've actually got out of the 50s. So I think there's a bit of an indication there, Kelvin, a couple rate drops, prices on, for sure, equipment coming a little bit, not like they're ideal, but they're better than they were. I think that's sort of a couple of things that are driving that.
Yeah, I think interest rates are a big part of this. As there for a number of years, all the talk was about how interest rates were climbing or needed to climb, and how high are they going to climb, when are they going to stop climbing, that kind of thing. And now we've made that turn, and they are starting to drop. And so I think that corresponds with the increase we've seen in farmers' confidence in willing to make farm investments, even though profitability and margins have tightened up now in general, but and on the finance side of things, as Lyndsey talked about. But yeah, I think there's some confidence. And also on the pricing side of things, we are seeing a bit of a correction in prices in some categories of farm investments where supply is outstripping demand at this point, or more than it has in many years. And so that is also probably helping farmers feel confident in making farm investments. But like you said, it is still quite negative relative to the neutral line there.
Yeah, we got some we got some concerns on profitability here right now in 24. I think, no matter where you are, I think we're going to see, if you combine some of this data to what we've been hearing anecdotally with the farmer rapid fire, it's not like it's doomsday, but Lyndsey, there's a lot of concern out there in terms of, hey, I gotta get to the other side of this current part of the cycle.
Yep, absolutely. And if there's one thing that we know, it's that, farmers understand that good times aren't forever, but neither are bad times. And at times we've got to sort of stick it out through a cycle and make the best decisions you can. Unfortunately, there's a lot of those costs that have not come down perhaps in line with crop prices or other things that we're still dealing with, right? Fertilizer, land prices, land rents, these sorts of things that, we still are going to have to shoulder. But over time, hopefully those do start to correct per se. And this is where, having a sharp pencil, making some sound decisions can make a real difference, knowing your cost of production. And unfortunately, unprofitable crop prices, we hope won't last long, but they do happen, and we have to be able to ride these out. That's just part of the cycle, but it sucks. If I could just state for the record, no one is saying this is a good thing. I would like to just make that very clear. Right,
and the decline in the commodity market has been a positive for livestock producers as we continue to see. They have a lot more optimism about the current farm financial performance and the future farm financial performance, which makes sense because those feed costs have come down. But like we heard from Anne Wasko earlier here on the show in the Beef Market Update, cattle prices have come back now, where if you have unhedged cattle, you're in the red, on a broad brush sort of basis. In agriculture, we talk a lot about things that are out of our control. One of the things that feels out of my control, and I wish I could change it personally, like if I could just move the needle by just snap of the fingers, it was to try to give farmers more confidence in their grain marketing plan. Because the more confidence you have, not overconfidence, like
confidence,
ignorant. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, but, just true educated confidence in their marketing plan to steer through such risky times like we're going through. I wish I could do that, Kelvin. I feel a little bit, that's why we have market analysts. We had Chip Flory on Wednesday's show. Just pull a nugget out. I'm really trying to help people in that's the category I always look forward to seeing is, has that needle moved? And unfortunately, we're pretty much even with last quarter.
Yeah, very similar to last quarter or last time we ran the survey. And so, yeah, it's tough to feel confident and build your confidence in grain marketing when margins are tighter than they have been in a long time. And so I can sympathize with everybody who responded that way in the survey. There are a few other nuggets in this latest sentiment index. We asked some questions about the impact of the rail strike and other aspects when it comes to grain marketing. And quite interesting. I think you mentioned it earlier, Shaun, that 80% of farmers in Western Canada said they were quite concerned, or at least moderately concerned about the strike. And this, of course, we have to remember this survey was done back in July. So I think that number has probably climbed since then as more awareness of the potential impact and reality is setting in here in terms of it's just 6 days away. I think that number has probably climbed, but it's interesting that farmers who are ahead on their marketing of 24 crop are more concerned about the rail strike than farmers who are just on pace for normal grain sales for their 24 crop or behind in terms of their normal selling pace. And I think that has to do with cash flow planning, and that's an impact of this rail strike that we also haven't, or another detrimental effect here is the impact that this will have on farmers' cash flow who have pre-sold crop thinking they were making the wise decision in planning their cash flow needs into the future here, the next 6-12 months. And what happens if there's a rail strike and you can't deliver grain because the elevator's backed up? And I know some farmers talked about that on the Farmer Rapid Fire yesterday as well, but cash flow is a big concern here. And you can see that in the survey results here as farmers who are, at least that's the dots that I'm connecting here. The farmers who are more sold on their 24 crop are also more concerned about the rail strike. Maybe they're also just more aware.
Well, Lyndsey, what we also saw, Kelvin's talking about some of these cross tabs we can do. If you're holding 23 crop unsold on farm still, you're more likely concerned about the strike, except for those holding over 40% of their 23 inventory. If you're holding over 40% of your 23 inventory, you're not feeling very good. They're equally just as concerned as those that have none. There's some weird stuff that comes out of this as well.
So here's where I'm going to so Kelvin's connecting some dots. I'm going to do one of those crazy string things because we don't always ask the why in this survey, right? And so we do discuss the why, and people will phone in and tell us, why they said a certain way and those sorts of things. And so we do appreciate that feedback. I suppose you could take it the other way. So I completely agree with Kelvin that, someone that has been doing their homework, making incremental sales, trying to be the responsible person and plan for cash flow, etc., is really concerned because that's throwing a wrench in that certainty, in that system of what they've been planning for. Perhaps someone who is sitting on a lot of 23 crop hopes that this throws a wrench in grain prices and they come up. And by the time they can market their grain, the prices have improved. That is my guess as to what they could be thinking.
Yeah, but I got people sending me emails saying that the strike is already impacting some of the basis in the countryside. And it's
absolutely it will.
Impacting.
Yeah. Okay, but if you still have over 40% of your 23 crop, maybe you are the kind of person that is okay holding it for longer and longer and longer. I don't know, because goodness, I would love. So anyone who is sitting there and answered this way, could you contact us and let us know why you would answer that way? Because honestly, I think at this point we're guessing.
Or are you just planning to hold it longer past when the strike?
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
you're the kind of person that has lots of storage, and maybe you're a flax grower and you're used to 5 years of storage.
So we also looked at how the rail strike would impact your marketing activities. And there's a relation to there how you feel about financial performance. So 41% of those that feel worse off about their current farm financial performance see a significant impact to their marketing activities, while only 26% of better off see a significant impact. So you feel worse off, you feel more, there's going to be more impact to your marketing activities. So there's a tie in there as well. And once again, a thank you to everybody that works with us to complete these short surveys, because this kind of data is not existent anywhere else in the market. I think there's important things here for, farm groups to say, hey, look, 80% of Western Canadian farmers are concerned about this strike. Those are great data points to be able to use in some of the advocacy. Lyndsey, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if we haven't plugged it enough, you can become part of our Insights panel and answer these surveys. So thank you to everyone who does. But if you're someone who's listening to these results and you want to have your say and get the results directly to your email, head over to RealAgristudies.com and you can still join. Do it.
Very good.
It is incredibly valuable information and really cool.
It is very valuable.
Yeah.
Farmers speaking with one voice, which we don't get enough of in this world. Okay, we're going to take a break. We've got more of the Real Ag Issues panel coming up right after this.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School. brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here, everybody, here on this Friday. Lots has happened this week. Sad news, Kelvin. The passing of former Ag Minister Chuck Strahl. And I know you did a bunch of research on his career, posted the story in the summary at RealAgriculture.com. I have to admit, there was a lot going on when he was the Ag Minister.
Yeah, looking back, there were a lot of very active files that influenced what we have in Canadian agriculture today during Strahl's short time as Ag Minister. So he was the Ag Minister for Canada from February 2006, first appointed by Prime Minister Stephen Harper when the Conservatives formed government. He was kind of a bit of a surprise or unexpected pick in the agriculture community because he came from a logging and business background in BC, not directly agriculture related. And so he served as the Ag Minister for just over a year and almost a year and a half until the middle of 2007. And so during that time, the aspect of Chuck Strahl that I remember most was the effort as he really kicked off and took a bunch of steps towards dismantling the Canadian Wheat Board's single desk at the time. He was the Ag Minister who led that charge and then was later replaced by Jerry Ritz, who finished the job 5 years later in 2012. But Strahl took several steps to begin dismantling the Wheat Board. That included cutting a bunch of voters from the director elections in 2006. In the Wheat Board director elections, he disqualified over 16,000 people, and that was controversial. These people hadn't sold grain through the Wheat Board in the previous 2 years, so he said, well, why do you get to vote? You're not an active farmer. You don't meet the criteria. He also fired the Wheat Board president and CEO in late 2006 after he appeared with the Liberal leader at the time, Stéphane Dion. And then he also introduced regulations in 2007 that would have actually removed barley from the Wheat Board's single desk. And he called August 1st, 2007 Barley Freedom Day. But the federal court the day before that struck down that regulatory change and said the government had overstepped its authority by trying to remove barley from the Wheat Board's monopoly through a cabinet order. So again, Jerry Ritz came in, succeeded Chuck Strahl in 2007, and 5 years later, the Conservatives passed legislation ending the Wheat Board single desk. But there were a number of other big files, like you said, Shaun. Strahl was the Ag Minister when the original Growing Forward Ag Policy Framework was agreed to in principle in 2007, and that led to the Agri-Stability and Agri-Invest programs that we still have today in 2024. That replaced the CASE and NISA programs for farmers that remember those programs. He was also the Ag Minister when the Conservatives announced Canada's first 5% ethanol mandate in 2006 in Saskatoon with Environment Minister Rona Ambrose at the time. So BSE, of course, was active. So yeah, a lot of different big files happening when Strahl was Ag Minister, and he later served as Transport Minister and then retired from federal politics in 2011. And his son, Mark Strahl, has actually sat in his seat in that Fraser-Chilliwack riding since he left office back in 2011.
He was involved in a lot of different stuff. And he was
very busy.
Very busy. It kind of right at the beginning of Real Agriculture, 2008 is when we first posted. Don't go back and read some of that early stuff. It's quite embarrassing for yours truly. But the website looked different then.
It did.
Think about the Wheat Board for a second, and let's bring it full circle to where we started with the rail strike. Today, if I'm concerned about marketing my spring wheat, for example, and this rail strike, and it's going to impact my marketing activities, I can get a bid from Columbia Grain across the border in Montana. I can haul my grain across the line and I can sell it to maybe get around having to rely on the Canadian railways, and I can use the BNSF. The time of Chuck Strahl, that was not possible. You couldn't just drive across the border from Coots to Sweetgrass in Montana and say, hey, I'm here to take my grain south, because you know what? It was against the law. Kind of comes full circle, doesn't it, Lyndsey?
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, yes, you could do it, but then you would end up in jail, as some farmers did, in shackles. Yeah. So, which it simultaneously feels like a long time ago, and also not definitely that these were options or weren't options. And so I too was really surprised when I read through Kelvin's account of just what happened in 18 months. It made me feel a little bit like. Maybe government moved faster back then? I don't know, because it feels like right now, if we were to look at what has all happened maybe in the last 14, 15 months on the ag file, I don't feel like maybe we've had nearly as much happening on that file from a government perspective anyway. So perhaps that's one of the things there. But certainly, I think to me, if it sort of reminds us of anything, is just how active an ag minister can be. And I would just like once more to ask where Lawrence MacAulay is on all of this. I know it's summer. Kelvin's got a point. Where is he? Has he finally surfaced and said he's going to talk about the railways?
Oh, I don't know where Minister MacAulay is, other than I'm sure he's celebrating a lot of local events back home in
I'm sure he is. Where there are no railways.
Doing that stuff. I wanted to make one parallel point, though. We have to remember Chuck Strahl was the ag minister when the Conservatives finally formed government after many years in the wilderness. And this was a new party full of new ideas. And I think we could see, I think that there's a cyclical nature to this, where if we have a change in federal government and we do have a Poilievre conservative government on the horizon, I think we could see a lot of active files in agriculture in that first 18-month period again.
Yep, I would agree.
I 100% agree with you. Absolutely. Hey, I also want to mention, for those of you in the livestock sector, we also had the passing Thursday night of Greg Henderson. He was the editor of Drovers with Farm Journal. And if you're in the beef business and you have you've followed along with what's been going on in the North American beef markets, you've read Greg Henderson's stuff, and thoughts are with his family. Greg was a great guy. He was always so kind. Loved interviewing him. He always wanted to have a side conversation about how life was and what kids were doing. And Greg Henderson, a true great man, and he will be very, very missed in the beef media business for sure. Kelvin, the feds have tweaked the capital gains entrepreneur incentive to include farm property. What's the impact here? Is this good or bad?
Oh, I think it's good in terms of reducing the capital gains burden, and it's also good if you're an accountant who can navigate all the details of this as it's certainly complicated. But the government has, it says, listened to feedback from the tech sector and the farming sector specifically. It mentions those, and this week it announced that this entrepreneur incentive that was announced back in the federal budget back in April, together with the capital gains inclusion rate increase, they are going to extend that entrepreneur incentive to farm property. So there is potential here for a somewhat lower capital gains burden on farmers when selling farm assets in farm succession type scenarios. But it has, I think, the devil's in the details, and there's a lot of details to sort through here. So Grain Growers of Canada and some other groups have come out saying this doesn't go far enough, this is patchwork, and that this they basically would rather have government immediately repeal. And we saw 7 provinces this week too also say that they want the federal government to repeal as soon as possible the capital gains tax changes that took effect in June.
And to wrap up, there's a lot of things we need in Canada. Was another political party one of them? If you missed it, now we've got the Canada Future Party was launched here this week. Supposed to speak to Canadians that can't identify with the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party, so a centrist party. So to speak quickly, do we feel this has legs? Lyndsey, you first.
Oh, well, when you put it that way, that's a bit different. I had my answer all lined up, but you said, does it have legs? So, you know what? It actually comes in parallel with the discussion of Chuck Strahl and of the Conservatives coming to power. When you look at Strahl's career, we hear words like reform and alliance, and I mentioned that, you know what, we sort of are due for a new party to show up and say, hey, we're not happy with how things are going. We need to sort of adjust, and we need to sort of either, the left needs to come to center, the right needs to come to center, and we need to figure something else out. We've also had the alternative where it's, with the right needs to go further and the left needs to go further, and we get a new party. So do we need this party? Does it have legs? I would say, I think time-wise, I'm not surprised. We've got, a group of individuals that are saying, look, we want fiscal responsibility, but we want, social inclusivity, and they should not be mutually exclusive. And frankly, I think that probably resonates with a lot of people. Now, will they have some staying power, actually get some seats? Possibly, but perhaps this is a really good indication for the Conservatives and the Liberals that they have neglected parts of their party, and maybe they need to be sitting down and thinking about their policies a little more closely. So that's what I'll say about that.
Kelvin, what do you think this lane looks like? Like, do any examples come to mind what a lane between the Conservatives and Liberals looks like here? We talked a lot about the overlap of worker issues. Okay, go ahead.
I do. Yeah.
I think it looks like the Paul Martin Liberals, more of a fiscally responsible Liberal. And I think that this party won't have legs to last long, but it could influence the future of the Liberal Party of Canada, which the last 9 years has been the party of Justin Trudeau, not the Liberal Party of Canada. I would say it's been more the party of Trudeau. And right now in that party, this is one of the reasons why he's staying on as leader, even though that he's doing so poorly in the polls. There isn't the movement in the party to kick him out as leader, because a lot of people owe their success of the last 9 years, their time in office, to Justin Trudeau. They've ridden on his coattails. I think the ideas from this party could shape what the Liberal Party looks like in the future post-Trudeau, because there's going to be a lot of questions. What does the Liberal Party look like after it loses Justin Trudeau as its central identity?
Well, I'll tell you what. If the Democrats end up winning in November, it should be a clear sign to Prime Minister Trudeau, Lyndsey, that there's a time where you just got to say the party's better without me.
So now we're drawing parallels between Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau.
Well, different age,
but
same
we've
predicament.
done it before. Yeah, exactly. Both have great hair. So, there's that. No, it is true that I think that if there is potentially a lesson in what the last few months have looked like, few weeks, I guess, but in U.S. politics, is that you can reinvigorate a party by having a leader step down when their time is done and before they're booted out of office, actually. So, I mean, unprecedented, yes, but has it rejuvenated the Democratic nominee and, presumptive, I guess, as of today, officially? Yeah, I think that perhaps it will speak volumes. Will that actually change anything? No. I really think that Justin is in it till there's an election. Perhaps people around him will point to it and say, look what we could do. I don't think it will be enough. I think Justin Trudeau is in it till the election.
Yeah, for all you political junkies, Kelvin and I, Lyndsey, I'm not sure if you've read it yet, but the Andrew Lawton's book about Pierre Poilievre.
I have not yet.
Okay, it's a good read. It's
okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have positive things to say and some critiques, but this isn't a book review session. But I encourage people to check it out. It's an interesting dive into the career of Conservative Party of Canada leader Pierre Poilievre. Okay, that's it. That's all the time that we have, everybody. This has been a lot of fun. Lyndsey, have yourself a great weekend.
You as well, and you too, Kelvin.
Kelvin, all the best to you.
Thank you. Take care, all.
Happy attempt at combining, even with some of that rain. Hey, next week, I'm looking forward. If you're going to be at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference in Saskatoon, I will be there Wednesday and Thursday. So please say hello if you are going to be in attendance. Looking forward to that for sure. Everybody have yourselves a great weekend. Thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll chat again on Monday. Cheers, everybody.
Get flexible farm financing with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Save on interest costs and sell when the time and price are best for you. Visit ccga.ca to learn more. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advanced Payments Program.